I believe in the audience. I have faith in the audience. I think, especially with the way I've had the privilege of making the work that I make, I have extreme faith in the audience. And I also believe, too, that if the cast, and I knew they would, gave full embodiment to these characters, that this idea of the brutality or the hellishness, it wouldn't be the
Mm.
point.
How on earth did you manage to steady your sails to make sure this project was the project you always wanted it to be?
Thank you for having us. First of all, I think for me, this was such a long held dream of mine that I considered it a privilege and a responsibility. And so, I think in a certain ways, the duration or the scale of the project didn't really matter. It was just too important for me to not bring my best every day. And what we were doing was too difficult and too heavy for me not to also create the space within myself and on the set to always have the welfare of the people you see on the screen with me working on this project, to not have that at the forefront as well. You know, when you buy a computer, it has like the storage of the hard drive, and then it has what they call the RAM, the
Mhm.
random access memory. And people often skimp on the RAM. You know, they just buy the biggest hard drive. They can save as many MP3s as they want. But the thing that makes the computer go is the RAM. And I just knew on this one, I just had to just boost that random access memory. And you used a word that I really love. You said custodian. And it's interesting. I remember growing up as a kid, I would always think that the custodian was the lowest person on the totem pole, you
Mhm.
know, at the place that I went to school or at the building that I worked at. But the definition is a person who has responsibility for or looks after something. And I think referring to me as the custodian of this show, I think is apt because I had to look after it. And then all these beautiful souls I see here, Tuso and Joel and Aaron and Sheila and everyone else, they were the actual thing. They were the actual creation. And just knowing that I wasn't doing it alone, it's what got me through.
Thank you. A lot of people almost, I guess, warned me saying, listen, this word kept coming up heavy, heavy, heavy. And that actually wasn't what I felt. You know, violence on screen isn't new to any of us. And what I felt that all of you did is to remind us that everything on screen is very light relative to the reality of those that you're portraying. Now, with that being said, you know, when you knew that this was going to be 10 hours of a universe that many people want to turn their face and pretend didn't exist, what was your vision for how it could be seen by those that really, really need to see it, above and beyond Amazon and distribution and everything else? What, in terms of Colson's story, was there a point of view that you think could make something relatively hellish accessible so we can never forget what history has gone before us?
I mean, yes and no. You know, I believe in the audience. I have faith in the audience. I think, especially with the way I've had the privilege of making the work that I make, I have extreme faith in the audience. And I also believe, too, that if the cast, and I knew they would, gave full embodiment to these characters, that this idea of the brutality or the hellishness, it wouldn't be the point. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
would just be in some ways a matter of course. You know, only one and a half of these episodes take place on the actual plantation. And so I knew because of that, there were 8.5 hours that didn't. And typically,
Mm-hmm.
when we watch a show set in this world, we're used to the entirety of it being taking place on the plantation, it being about life on the plantation. And I felt like because of all the life that we were filling in between those places, the first episode and the last, that there would be something on this journey that was revelatory or illuminating for the audience. I think the other element of it too was this idea of show versus tell. I felt like where it was important as a catalyst for the character, for Cora, these acts of hellishness or brutality at the beginning of our story, we would show, and everywhere else, as she got further and further away from that, we would tell. And I think always being aware of what that balance was, I thought, despite the fact that I felt like the images we were creating, as you said in your intro, they are rooted in fact and they can't compare to the fact of what happened. I did feel like the audience, would be willing to go on the journey.
Thank you. And although they're not here, I have to bring up James Laxton and Nicholas. I hope I'm pronouncing his surname Brittle. For Britell, the most extraordinary cinematography and the score, which I feel is now tattooed into my own soul. And one other cast member that isn't here, who played Homer as well, Chase. I bow down. I don't even. Yeah. Wow. How? So collaboratively, in terms of the cinematography and the score, how did that process work? Because this conversation is about the craft, but also in particular the Homer character, which embodies so much of every aspect of this story. How did you cast that, and what did you want Homer to represent, seeing as he's not here to speak? I'd love to hear your viewpoint, Barry.
Whoa, what did Homer represent? Yeah, shout out to Chase Dillon, shout out to Joel as well. When you're working with a child actor, the person in scene with that actor is often helping you direct their performance. And Joel is a director himself, so I share the credit for Chase's performance with Chase and Joel. There's this guy named Don McManus who's in this movie Vice that Plan B made before we made Underground Railroad. He actually screen tested with Chase. I haven't gotten a chance to shout him out yet. And I wanted a kid who was, 9 going on 90, and that was Chase. He thinks he's the big boss. And then I'm glad you mentioned James and Nick in the run up to this question. Then it was about always trying to understand with the child actor is as much about psychology as it is about craft, about trying to put Chase in situations like a sports analogy, trying to place him in the formations as I'm talking to the UK, trying to place him in formations on the pitch where I know he'll succeed. And so there were some scenes where I told him what the scene was, but not what he would do. The scene where he and Ridgway are standing by the lake, having the conversation about the keys, Chase has no prep for that scene. Only Joel has the prep for the scene. And then now that it shows out, at the very, very end, this is how it ties to James, after Cora walks off and gets on the handcart with Molly, that's take one, that Steadicam shot. And I just whispered to James, to whisper to Possum, Steadicam op, I told him, go back. Because Chase doesn't know we're coming back. And so he's just in the scene. And Joel is there and he's crying because he's lost his man. And the camera just like, so shout out to the Steadicam op, because that's not playing. And he just goes back, he goes back. And we come over and all that stuff with Donald Glover, Childish Gambino. I don't know that's going to happen because the moment is unplanned. But I think with Chase, there was always a moment where he was just it. And Joel was so good because Joel, I wouldn't call cut. Joel must have been like, all right, what are we doing? But he's still in it. He's still in it because we had figured out there were moments where Chase just like, he was Homer and we had to be there to get it. So shout out to James and Possum, Steadicam op and Joel and everybody. It was just, with 116 days, you figure out how to do it, man. And there were just moments where we got it.
Can I contribute to that very quickly?
Please, sir.
I'm an Australian and I believe in blowing other people's trumpets or horns. There's something about Barry's early preparation with Chase, which created something I'd never really seen before as intensely, which is a child understanding the parameters of shifting from their own personality into a character. And you would know that if Chase was here on this call, because he is an adult in many ways, and yet he has a very dynamic personality. He loves to joke around. He won't sit still. He's a real entertainer in many ways in social environments. Watching Barry communicate with him, the understanding that in this world of the show, he could not behave with the dynamism that he exists with in our world, that he would be in trouble for talking back to an adult person, for joking around, for looking you even in the eye, he might get in trouble. And watching Chase just sort of put his costume on and understand that shift was all part of that preparation. And it was, you know, if you know the phrase, Sir Ian, thou shalt not pass, you know, that was Chase. It was like Chase Dillon, Homer. And he understood that.